The Art of Leadership Network.
Hey leaders, welcome to the Lead Culture Podcast. I'm your host, Jenni Catron, CEO of the Foresight Group. We're a company dedicated to helping leaders develop thriving teams. Each week, I'll be your guide as we explore practical strategies to equip you with the tools you need to lead with clarity, confidence, and build unstoppable momentum in your organization. My mission is to be your trusted coach, empowering you to master the art of self-leadership so you'll learn to lead yourself well so you can lead others better. Each week, we take a deep dive on a leadership or a culture topic. You'll hear stories from amazing guests and leaders like you who are committed to leading well. So let's dive in and keep learning on this leadership journey together. Friends, this is episode 300. That feels absolutely crazy to me. And if you've been here for the majority of those episodes, you deserve a huge round of applause. Thank you so much for caring about leadership and culture, for being committed to your growth and development, because culture matters, leadership matters, the mission matters for your organization, for you personally. And this is why I do the work that I do. I want to help equip you to lead well. I want to equip you to lead culture. So I am so glad you're here. If you're newer with us, I am thrilled that you've discovered the Lead Culture Podcast. And I would encourage you to go back into the archives. Lots of fun stuff to check out. But particularly, we have been in the Summer of Leadership series, where we've been taking time to develop the skills that fuel great leadership. I need some of those, don't you? Right? The skills that fuel great leadership. So here's what I want you to remember. These skills don't just make you a better leader. They're essential for building and sustaining a healthy culture. Leadership and culture go hand in hand. They can't be pulled apart. Like they are woven together. And so these skills that we're talking about, they do help you grow as a leader, but they are also helping shape your culture. Culture isn't something that just exists. It's something that gets shaped every day by what you model, what you tolerate, and what you communicate. And that's why we've been focusing on key leadership skills that directly impact culture. So let me give you a quick recap. Maybe you've just joined in. Maybe you just want a refresher. Either way, here are the skills we've covered so far. We started with self-leadership, the skill that unlocks really all the others, because the hardest person for you to lead is you. Secondly, we talked about emotional intelligence, the skill that sets you apart from just everyone else. If you can't read the room, you can't lead the room. And so emotional intelligence is the thing that really sets you apart and gives you that edge as a leader. The third thing we talked about is communication. I really believe that communication is a sign of respect that shapes culture. If you don't communicate clearly, your team is left guessing, and guessing breeds confusion. We also talked about decision making, that when we lead with clarity, it eliminates confusion, or at least reduces confusion. But every decision you make is a signal about your culture. Like how you make decisions tells me so much about your culture. That's a fun topic to get into. And then what we talked about last week was delegation, that we've got to let go to grow. Great culture requires trust, and trust grows when you empower others with responsibility. So today we're getting into another fun one. We're going to talk about accountability. And I said that with so much enthusiasm, and you probably heard that with a little bit of disdain, right? In my 25 years of leadership, I feel like I've noticed a decline in accountability, both in employees being accountable for their responsibilities and for managers holding their team accountable for those responsibilities. Like, I think it's kind of going both ways. Maybe it's a culture thing broadly. I'm not sure. But I believe it's really essential for healthy teams. By definition, accountability means an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. I'll say it again. Definition of accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. So taking responsibility, being accountable for your actions. And the best teams embrace a culture of accountability. Like, you've heard me say this before, but a lot of times we hear the word culture and we think of all the warm, fuzzy, kumbaya stuff of organizational life. And those things have a place in culture, but actually great cultures get stuff done. Like, great teams are like in it together. And so one of the things that marks those teams that I see just have so much momentum and great culture is they have appropriate accountability. Like, everyone is taking responsibility for their work and they are being accountable for their actions. So each team member accepts responsibility for their role. They understand what they'll be expected to account for in their actions. Like, they get it and they are on board. So we've started avoiding accountability, I think, just generally because sometimes it feels harsh, or maybe it just doesn't feel nice, or we fear how it might make other people feel. Like, we've gotten a little, like, in my opinion, maybe overly sensitive of bumping into each other, shall we say, organizationally, or making each other uncomfortable. We don't want to be uncomfortable and we don't want to make others uncomfortable. And so I suspect that's one of the primary reasons why maybe we avoid accountability is we don't want to be uncomfortable and we don't want others to be uncomfortable. But that sentiment holds us back from actually giving the clarity that each other needs to succeed. When we strip accountability out of leadership, we ultimately erode trust, because you can tell. Like, so let's say there's a leader that I'm reporting to, and I can tell they're holding back. Like, I can tell they're not giving me the full picture. And so then I start to wonder and I start to doubt, or I start to question if you never get input that tells you how you're doing both positively and constructively, like if you're not getting the constructive side, or if somebody's not following up, and this is more specific to accountability, if a leader's not following up with you to say, hey, you said you'd have that report in by Friday and it's Monday, is it ready yet? We don't have to be ugly in how we hold people accountable, but we actually need to do it. Like, we need to say, like, if we have a commitment, we need to follow through on that commitment. There was something I was supposed to deliver for a client last week, and it was due to them at the end of the month. And it was like Friday night and Monday was going to be the last day of the month. And so I sent that client an email and said, hey, I know you're still waiting on this from me. I will have it to you by beginning of the day on Monday. Now, I was getting in by the skin of my teeth of getting that report to them when I told them I was going to get it to them. But I was holding myself accountable for that commitment. Now, likely and hopefully that client on Monday, if they didn't see that from me, would have reached out to say, hey, Jenni, you said you'd have this report ready. Do you have it yet? That's completely appropriate. But I think sometimes we avoid that because we're afraid of making people uncomfortable, or we might go, I know they've been really busy or they've had a lot going on, and we give them excuses for them. But what happens is we're eroding trust in both directions. Great cultures are marked by our commitments, the standards, the goals, the expectations of who we are and how we work together, right? Like, great cultures are clear about their commitments to each other. So healthy cultures hold one another accountable to those commitments. Accountability, and I want you to hear this, accountability done right is an act of care. It's thoughtful. It says, I believe in you enough to expect your best, to expect you to follow up on the commitments you've made and what you said you would do when you said you would do it. Like, I care enough, and I care enough about our mission to say, I'm going to follow up with you because the agreements that we made or the responsibilities that you had are important enough to our mission for me to check in and make sure you've completed them. Or if you reverse that, you're saying to yourself, the mission is important enough. My contribution to the mission is important enough. So therefore, I'm going to be accountable to the other people who are expecting things from me so that they know I'm on it. Like I'm not leaving them guessing. I'm building trust by communicating that I'm being accountable for what I'm responsible for. You see how this works? It's so powerful, you guys. And when we get it, it's a game changer in your culture. When team members lack clarity for their role or their responsibilities, and you remember how throughout the Lead Culture Framework, if you've read the Culture Matters book, you've seen me talk about this a lot. And I talk about the power of clarity. In fact, recently I was working with a team and we were working through a lot of organizational clarity pieces. And I came in to one of our meetings and I brought these little mini boxing gloves that I found on Amazon, like these little bitty 4-inch boxing gloves. And I wrote the word clarity in a gold Sharpie on each of them. And I handed them out at the beginning of the meeting. And, it's a little bit awkward because you're handing out boxing gloves, in a meeting, like what in the world? But I basically was communicating to them, we're fighting for clarity. Now we're not fighting with each other. We're fighting for clarity because they're going through some good growth and growing pains of, that are impacting how they work together, all good things, but it's forcing them to have to really think through the clarity they need to provide and then being accountable to one another in that. And so this accountability piece is another fight for clarity. So you might get yourself some boxing gloves and write clarity on them because this, I think, is one of the most valuable perspectives leaders can have that helps shape culture, is that commitment, that fight for clarity. When team members lack clarity, specifically when we're talking about accountability, they might be lacking clarity for their role, their responsibilities, their goal. Like they might have a number of questions. And so then it's difficult for them to be accountable if they don't have the clarity they need. It becomes difficult for them to be accountable because they don't understand what they're accountable for. Another conversation happened recently, and we discovered that a job description was like 5 years out of date. Well, of course, then it's difficult for that leader to know what they're accountable for if their job responsibilities are not clear, right? So as a result, we can become complacent or even disengaged if we're not sure what we should be doing. Like the more clarity we have, the more confidently we contribute organizationally. So what might happen, you might hear things like this, or you might have said things like this from time to time. We might deflect responsibility when we're lacking clarity and say things like, I didn't know that was my responsibility, or I thought someone else was doing that. Have you ever heard that in your organization? I suspect you have. Right. So we make excuses and they might be valid. We might legitimately have thought somebody else was responsible, but then maybe our leader or somebody else on the team thinks we're responsible. So that fuzziness, that lack of clarity makes it difficult to be accountable. Accountability is only possible when organizational clarity has been provided. And so leaders, if you've worked through the Lead Culture Framework from the book, you know that organizational clarity is that second level of the hierarchy of needs. And it is like right above it is a trust line. Like if we are not providing organizational clarity, it is really hard for team members to meaningfully contribute. So you want to make sure you are doing your best to give that level of clarity that helps every team member succeed. Where accountability goes wrong or it gets mislabeled, it'll get mislabeled micromanagement, is when accountability isn't accompanied by ongoing conversations that clarify expectations. This is big, you guys. I will often hear people criticize leaders of being micromanaging. And that micromanagement tends to happen when we're not having those ongoing conversations that clarify expectations. And then what we do is we swoop in as leaders and then we get way into the details because something wasn't quite right. It wasn't meeting our expectations. And so then in an effort to hold somebody accountable, we go into micromanagement. But typically, it's because we haven't had those ongoing conversations that clarify expectations. We avoid accountability until we absolutely have to, and then we go into micromanagement mode. Not always, not exclusively, but often. So one of my favorite tools, I want to give you some actionable things and some ways to think about this week. One of my favorite tools for creating a culture of accountability is a simple question. And I'm not even sure where I first heard this question. I can't find who it originally is attributed to, so it may be just one of those that's become common. But the question is this: who is doing what by when? Who is doing what by when? This simple question provides immense clarity. Like, think about this at the end of a meeting. Who is doing what by when? Whether it's a one-on-one conversation, a team meeting, when team members leave the room clear on who is doing what by when, they know what is expected of them and are clear on their contribution. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but I want you to just envision a meeting this coming week and say, if we ended the meeting with this question, who is doing what by when? And we actually answered the question, because sometimes you can ask the question, but if you don't actually answer it and put the person's name, what they're doing, and when it's due, it's no help. So you actually have to answer the question. But if you do that, like, you leave a meeting with so much clarity of expectations that accountability becomes a lot easier. Because when they don't meet the expectation in that agreement, they have less defense when they're held accountable, right? And it's not like we're trying to, catch people not following through, but it becomes a lot clearer to you can't respond then and say, oh, I thought so-and-so was doing that, or I didn't think that was my responsibility, because we ended the meeting with a very clear understanding of who's doing what by when. It brings clarity, creates ownership, and it eliminates confusion. All really, really core contributors to culture. When responsibilities are unclear, accountability feels personal, right? Like, if all of a sudden you check in with me on something and I didn't know that that was my responsibility, well, then it gets a little personal. Then I'm like a little defensive. But when you've defined it, accountability feels fair, right? So we end the meeting with who's doing what by when. Jenni, you're finishing this report by June 30th. Well, then when you follow up and say, Jenni, it's July 1st, do you have that report ready? It's a simple yes or no. And I might have an explanation, of when I'll have it or why I didn't have it by when I said I would. Not that sometimes there are legitimate excuses and sometimes we just didn't get it done when we should have gotten it done. We just need to own that. That accountability question is very fair because we had a very clear agreement with one another. So accountability isn't about catching someone failing. That's not the goal. It's about helping them succeed. When people know the target, like what's expected, they're more motivated to hit it, right? Like, we want to win. If I know who's doing what by when, then I'm like, okay, that's due. I've got to get that done on it. Like, I'm going to hit that target. And when your whole team knows what's expected, like when everybody gets this and this becomes common language in your culture, you build a culture of mutual trust and commitment and even excellence, right? Like the level of our work goes up because we are following through on the commitments we've made to one another. We all want accountability from others, but the question is, are we willing to receive it ourselves? So these are the things I want you to reflect on, leaders, this week. Like, we want accountability, but are we willing to receive it ourselves? Are we willing to be held accountable? Because we're not above the law, leaders. Like, sometimes we are guilty of wanting to not play by the same rules or not have to be accountable to certain systems and processes. We want the workarounds. That isn't healthy in your culture. I'm just going to call that out. Like, sometimes we circumvent the systems because we can, because we're in the more senior seats in the organization, and it's not fair and it's not healthy in your culture. You need to be accountable to the same things you hold your team members accountable to. So are you willing to be held accountable for those same agreements? What do your actions say about the expectations you hold? Again, are you being congruent with the expectations you have and how you show up? And are you following through on what you say? And then inviting others to do the same. So I want you to think about this. I know I'm being a little bit of bossy big sister here, but I want you to be sure that you are as willing to be as accountable as you are asking others to be accountable. We have to go first and we have to lead first. There's back to our self-leadership, the first skill we talked about. So here's some actionable things this week. Those were some questions to just get you thinking, do some self-reflection, make sure you're modeling it. But then here's some things you can do this week for you and your team. Use the who is doing what by when question in your next team meeting. Like before you finish the meeting. Okay, guys, let's recap what we've discussed today. Who's doing what by when? I'm telling you, it's a game changer. Now, you've got to make sure then that there's a mechanism to follow up on those things. So maybe it's just the next meeting. You start the meeting with, hey, last week's, agreements were this, who's doing what by when, and you just check in on all of them. Or maybe you have a different way you want to do that, but you do need to have a follow-up mechanism. That's the accountability piece, right? So try that this week. Invite everyone to identify one area where clarity is missing. So this is a brave one. Maybe you want to do this week, maybe you don't, but invite your team to identify one area where clarity is missing and then address that, because maybe that's holding back accountability. Maybe even when you ask the who's doing what by when question, you bump into that and you realize, well, who should do that? Because it's not clear whose responsibility that is. We said we need to do this thing, but who should take the lead on that? Because here's another thing. When you do a clean agreement of who's doing what by when, you don't need 5 people in the who, because it's not going to be clear who's doing what. So you might need to subdivide that a little bit more. Okay, this person is doing this piece and this person is doing this piece and this person is doing this piece and all of them are doing it by this date, whatever the case may be. You want to make sure it's very clear. And so you might even discover as you answer the question, you might bump into some things where you need to provide some clarity. And then encourage team members to affirm when they see accountability working and celebrate it. So let's say that you have an agreement out of a meeting, who's doing what by when, somebody follows up and completes it, celebrate it, talk about it. Hey guys, last week, Sarah said that she was going to get this project done by this date, and she had it done 2 days early, and she came and gave me that update. It was such a win. So celebrate it when we do accountability well. Or let's say somebody from your team went to check with another team member who had committed to having a piece of the project done, and they went and they asked about it, and that team member owned the responsibility and said, you know what, I'm so close, but I'm actually 2 days behind. And, and they might have a good reason for that, but I will have it to you by this date. Well, there's a good model of accountability as well, because the person felt comfortable enough to go to them to say, hey, you're supposed to have this ready. Is it ready yet? Or can you give me an update on it? And then that person responded, taking responsibility for not having it quite ready. But they promised when they would, and they followed through on that agreement as well. You want to look for wins. You want to look for places you can celebrate. We actually did it. Maybe not perfect, but we're learning and we're getting better at holding one another accountable. In my book, Culture Matters, we talk about how clarity and accountability go hand in hand. I gave you an idea of that this week, but I want to encourage you, keep going deeper on these topics. I'm giving you flyovers in this podcast series, but there's so much to dig deeper into to help you really instill these skills inside your team and therefore shape your culture. If you want a culture where people thrive, they need to know what's expected and feel empowered to do it. And that's really what makes teams unstoppable. And accountability is just one of those pieces of that puzzle. Accountability, it sometimes gets a bad rap, but it's such a powerful force for you and for your team, and ultimately for achieving your mission. When you lead with clarity, accountability becomes a tool for building trust and not tearing teams down. So friends, I want you to give that some consideration. Use that question this week to just increase a sense of accountability in your culture. And then next week, we're going to come back, and here's another fun one, you guys. We're going to talk about feedback. I know you all just cheered out loud wherever you are, in the gym, in the car, whatever. You were like, woo, feedback. So powerful. How to give it in a way that builds people up and helps them grow. So I want to talk about that one because it's a biggie. So be sure to subscribe to our weekly Insights newsletter. If you're not on our Insights newsletter, you want to be, because here's what we do. Each week, I send you a full breakdown of the skills that we're talking about. and then additional tools and resources to help you keep building upon this. So just email me, Jenni Catron at getforesight.com, and we will get you added to the list. Or if you pop onto the website, getforesight.com, there's a little pop-up there that you can immediately subscribe. But subscribe to the newsletter. Like, we're not bombarding you. I send you one really, really thoughtfully designed email every week, giving you a deep dive on that topic that we're focused on for the week. So just email me, Jenni Catron, JenniCatron at getforesight.com, GET, the number 4, SIGHT.com. And then until then, keep leading well. If this episode was helpful, would you share it with a friend, rate and review it, give us feedback, hold us accountable to creating a great podcast that serves you well. And then I will see you next week.